This is our league, and this is your league. From the 55-yard line on CFL America Radio and the Sports History Network.
Stand by, 15 seconds to air. Stand by all cameras and videotape.
Ready with your opening graphics. Stand by, Howard. Here we come, Frank. Ready, Don.
Stand by audio, your opening music, and roll tape.
Take tape.
And here they are in session with television sports reporter Howard Cosell.
Well, thank you, Mel. And, of course, to my immediate left, the skipper of the Milwaukee...
A lot of people said, who is this guy? He's got an unusual way of talking. He's kind of unusual looking. And somebody told me he was a lawyer. What's he doing sports?
They're well aware of the fact that when they go back to the country, they begin all over again for their fight for racial justice as they see it.
Howard was outspoken. He was controversial. The things that people would accept in newspapers, they were appalled by on television.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Howard Cosell. Welcome aboard for still, as I said, another Monday night ABC.
He made the event big time. There's no question about it. He was a driving force of Monday Night Football.
It surfaced last week that a serious movement is afoot to form a new professional football league.
He was frankly sort of bored with the mundane essence of sports. He loved, the larger issues of conflicts and politics and human drama. That's what he really fed on.
Howard was a brilliant man. He changed the face of sports broadcasting in his own way. There'll never be anybody else like him.
I'm telling it like it is.
Howard Cohen was born in 1918 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He's the son of Isidore Martin Cohen and Nellie Rosenthal Cohen. And they came to Brooklyn when he was 9 months old. My grandfather, when he came to this country at Ellis Island, was given the name Cohen. The family name had been Cosell, K-O-Z-E-L. And my grandfather asked my father and my uncle to change the name back to the family name. So they anglicized it to Cosell. And that's where the name change came, long before he ever entered the field of broadcasting. As a Jew growing up in a poor side of town in Brooklyn, he used to have to run away from the Irish Catholic boys that chased him. It made him despise bigotry and prejudice. It made him terrified of being poor, terrified of being hungry, and it drove him his entire life to succeed. My father had a choice of being a doctor or a lawyer, and he didn't want to be a doctor, so he went with the law to please his father.
So Howard goes to law school at NYU, gets out in 1940, and is just starting his career when, of course, the war breaks out. He enlists, and of all things, is stationed at Fort Hamilton, which is in Brooklyn. But even more incredible, it is there that Howard, the Jew, meets Emmy, the Presbyterian, and it turns out that they are absolute soulmates.
My father asked my mother to marry him on their first date. He came and told his parents he was marrying. The nice word for it is shiksa, meaning Gentile woman. My grandma said she was going to kill herself, and he said, go ahead, mother, because I'm going to marry her. My maternal grandparents did not want my mother marrying a Jew. so it was very, very unpleasant for them for the first couple of years. They were married June 23rd, 1944, before a judge, and they were married for 46 and a half years, happily. My father loved the Brooklyn Dodgers. I mean, they were Daddy's passion. He communicated his love for the Dodgers to me and to my sister really through his love of Jackie Robinson and his constant conversation about Jackie Robinson.
Well, Howard early on took up the issue of minorities in athletics and in sports. Jack was attractive to him in that respect because Jack was coming into baseball as the only black player.
My father talked constantly about what Jackie had done, about his courage, about how one man could change, literally, the face of a country, which he firmly believed if Jackie did.
Howard felt in a personal way that he had gone through a little bit of what Jackie Robinson had gone through. And I believe Howard had enough sense of proportion to not equate the two, but it was what shaped his beliefs as a future journalist and as a person.
As a lawyer in the late 40s, he's making $25,000, $30,000 a year, which is a lot of money at that time. But he was making it by practicing union law. I think that just got to be a little too tedious for Howard.
I guess he was in his early 30s at the time. He wanted to get out of law and get into sports broadcasting. He said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, I'm going to get into this field, he said, because most of these guys in this field are assholes. And then I remember saying to him, then you'll be the top asshole of them all. He said, absolutely, I'm going to be the top.
I met Howard Cosell in 1953, which was the first year of his life as an announcer. He was doing pro bono work for Little League, and they had a radio show that was starting out, and suddenly Howard, from pro bono lawyer, became the lead announcer, the MC of the show.
The show that Howard hosted was called the All-League Clubhouse, and it was 3 teenage panelists interviewing ball players, and it ran from 1953 to 1956.
I was a teenager at the time, even as a teenager, feeling a little uncomfortable for the interviewee at times because Howard was looking for the story, and it was apparent.
He did both for a period of time, practicing law and doing this.
He was picking up a weekend show. He would do an occasional guest show. He would host a show. He would appear on a show.
And I've polled 10 sports writers from around the nation here, and 9 of them picked Sugar Ray to win by a knockout tonight. What's your answer to that?
9 of them are wrong.
Thank you, Carmen.
Finally, I think he went to my mother and asked her would it be okay if he gave this a shot full time. And my mother said to him, Howard, that's what you want to do? Go do it.
Mickey Mantle is with Howard Cosell.
Well, Mickey, you've been thirsting for a World Series when you'd be physically fit.
Well, I was running a company called Sports Programs Incorporated. I made a deal with ABC to negotiate and produce the sports programs. They had no sports department. The word came down to me very directly from the president of the network, Thomas W. Moore, don't hire Howard Cosell.
There was some resistance to Howard because Howard was deemed very New York. And if I can be very frank, to a lot of people, very New York means being very Jewish.
So here he is. He's in his 40s. He's switching a career, and he's denied the opportunity to go on network television because of anti-Semitism.
In the early 60s, when I was at running WABC radio, he did, of course, the fights for the radio network, and that was a big catapult for him.
Patterson in black trunks, Johansson in the white. Now we are ready for the referee's instructions to the fighters. Arthur McCanty, the referee.
But for several years, he was just our sports guy, and we were very happy with him.
Hello again, everyone. Howard Cosell speaking of sports. Yesterday at St. Petersburg, Florida, the New York Mets opened their instructional camp for youngsters out of the minor leagues.
It was 1962. It was the beginning of the New York Mets spring training, first spring training in St. Petersburg, Florida. Howard had a pregame and a postgame show on radio on WABC.
Hello again, everyone. Howard Cosell along with Big Ralph Branca.
And he was walking around the camp, shoving a small microphone in the faces of all the players, and everybody said, "Who is this guy?"
He didn't even have a voice for radio. And he kind of using this tape recorder as a battering ram, he slugged his way into the group.
One day, out of the blue, Cosell was interviewing somebody, and I don't think Ralph Houck was even involved in the interview. And as he walked by, he said, "Cosell, you know, you're like shit. You're everywhere." And the interesting thing is, Howard took it as a great compliment, because he was everywhere.
The gifted one speaks here. Howard on ABC. Cosell in action.
Howard had already carved out a niche for himself as a contrarian, going against the flow. He was the first reporter, broadcaster anywhere to call for the firing of Casey Stengel. Everybody else was writing about Casey's funny language and his garbled syntax, and Howard was out there saying, "We don't need a clown, let's get a real manager, let's see the Mets win a few ball games."
And there are those who think that great as he was through the years, Stengel is not quite the man to lead the young Mets to future glory. That's it for now. Howard Cosell reporting.
He showed what he could do on radio, but he was very frustrated because he couldn't crack the ABC television network.
I first became aware of Howard. He was doing something for ABC Radio. I had just joined what was then Sports Programs, Inc., which later became ABC Sports. There was no question that there were people in the hierarchy of ABC who didn't want him on the air because they just didn't like him on the air. But I used to try to ignore politics as much as possible, and I thought Howard was the best person for what we needed done, and so we just did it.
Right now, a special feature of Wide World of Sports this summer, ABC sports broadcaster Howard Cosell.
Let's find out once and for all if anybody can hit the top of that dome. Let's try to, Raj. And here goes Roger Maris. Oh! He really flubbed that. He called it a pop-up.
Well, it wasn't so much the baseball. It was when Howard connected with Muhammad Ali that he really became part of the national fabric, so to speak.
The synergy between Howard Cosell and Muhammad Ali really began the night that Ali won the heavyweight championship of the world from Sonny Liston in February of 1964. Howard was doing the radio commentary.
That's the first time I heard his voice.
I'm going up into the ring. I'm going up into the ring. The winner and the new heavyweight champion of the world is Cassius Clay. My son going up into the ring.
Clay was going crazy. I shook up the world. Give me justice.
I have upset the world. Give me justice.
He knew that this young fighter had the ability to become very famous in a hurry, and if he latched on to him, he would rise with Muhammad Ali.
Champ, can we get you over here, please? Yes, the champion has just combed his hair in order to make this appearance.
Ali and Cosell played off one another very, very well. Cosell was the straight man, Ali was the comic.
You're being extremely truculent. Whatever truculent mean, if that's good, I'm that.
They ran routines, among other things. Ali was always threatening to yank his toupee off.
Muhammad's not the man he used to be. He's not the man he used to be and pull his toupee off.
There was genuine affection between them. Ali had respect for Cosell as a professional. The relationship might not have been as close as Howard would have people believe.
They didn't share intimacies or confidences, but Ali understood that this was a guy who was going to give him a fair shake and let him speak his piece.
Fact of the matter is, what you stand for, you stand for. Is that right?
Oh, that's right. Everyone knows that, but I have no reason to take part in no politics because we, as Muslims, don't.
I think that the Cosell-Ali involvement within ABC's Wide World of Sports was critically important to our early success.
You must get in boxing position and just have a little dance like we're boxing, and just for 1 second. I have to time it. And for 1 second. Right there, see?
The relationship between Ali and Howard embodied in a way the brashness and the cutting-edge nature of ABC Sports in those days. And Ali was very, very controversial.
That is about the truth of the matter. Your name is Muhammad Ali. It's Muhammad Ali, that's right. And you...
Howard was the first person to ever call Muhammad Ali on the air. Everybody else insisted on calling him Cassius Clay. And we took all sorts of heat for that.
He said, if you want to be called Muhammad Ali, I'll call you Muhammad Ali.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
Former world heavyweight champion Cassius Clay refused to take the oath of induction into the Army. The black Muslim fighter, who's also known as Muhammad Ali, was immediately stripped of his title by the World Boxing Association. Clay insisted...
More than any other journalist in America, during the period of Muhammad Ali's so-called exile in the late 60s and early 70s, Howard Cosell kept his case in front of America.
Now, my father certainly was never a fan of the black Muslims as a group, but he certainly believed that Muhammad was entitled to his constitutional right.
My God, the man refused to take a step. There had been no arraignment, no grand jury presentment, no indictment, no trial, no conviction, no appeal to the
He used to say what's popular isn't always right, and what's right isn't always popular. And that if people didn't stand for things, they weren't good for much else.
You have any regrets? It's all in here.
Things really began to change for us as a family with my father's defense of Muhammad Ali. That was when the hate mail started. That was when threats on his life started. We began to get phone calls where people would say they were going to kill the nigger-loving Jew bastard or put the nigger-loving kike on the phone.
I think that he stood up for what he believed in, knowing that a lot of people didn't, but it was the right thing to do. For a lot of journalists who understood what he was doing, Howard gave us some strength and bravery as well.
Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Clay, will arrive.
My first encounter with him was at the 1968 Olympics. And the great event down there was the Black Power salutes of John Carlos and Tommy Smith.
Immediately after the victory, the following award ceremony took place.
This caused a sensation in the press corps. So at the end of it, Carlos and Smith walked off the stands. They sidestepped this mob of reporters and photographers and went right to Howard Cosell.
I don't think he had the answers, but he understood the problem, and he asked questions that gave a young athlete like myself enough space to say what I felt.
Are you proud to be an American?
I'm proud to be a black American.
The single most significant media issue in the 20th century is race. And Cosell was unafraid about race.
26 years, for instance, since Jackie Robinson came into the big leagues, and still no major league black manager.
He was a champion of Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Jackie Robinson and Curt Flood, all the people who got in controversial situations with the advancement of sport.
The people have demonstrated that they want to watch sports events. That there is
Roone Arledge gave Howard the real opportunity he wanted by making him a legitimate network prime-time television star by putting him on Monday Night Football.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Howard Cosell. This will be the first of 14 primetime National Football League telecasts brought to you by ABC Sports.
Howard's importance to Monday Night Football really can't be underestimated. Everybody had a good, solid announcer, and everybody had the ex-jock expert commentator. What they didn't have was the counterbalance. So Roone came up with the idea of putting 3 announcers in the booth and creating a conflict.
And tonight, the atmosphere is as tense in this booth as it is on the gridiron. We have coming to vocal grips the ex-Giant Frank Gifford and the ex-Cowboy Don Meredith. Hopefully, I shall serve as a provocative catalyst during the course of the evening.
Howard was neither a play-by-play announcer, nor was he an expert commentator in football. He dealt to a large degree in opinions and controversy, all of which had been lacking in television.
You had this country bumpkin, this guy that, how you doing, Howard? Make all of America say, did you hear what Don Meredith said last night about Howard Cosell? And all he said was, come on, Howard.
So it's 3 downs and over for the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's been their wont so often tonight at a time when they desperate their wont, W-O-N-T.
Oh, Howard.
The education of Dandy Don continues. We await the punt.
People began to take sides, rooting between Dandy Don and Howard.
But right now, to tell you in detail about the Oilers as only he can with his Texas cornpone, Dandy Don Meredith.
I never said anything ugly about you, Howard. The Houston
I used to come in and my office was filled with boxes of mail to get him off, and all the advertisers wanted him off.
Make sure Cosell gets this picture. He stinks.
Everybody thought that, what does this man know about football?
61 Curly Culp. These Kansas City Chiefs, 81 doesn't look real sharp either. Upshaw. They got a lot of work ahead of them to get into shape.
I'm going to take you down there and let you tell them that personally.
If we see it, Giff, we got to say it.
People either hated Howard Cosell or loved him. Nobody was in the middle. Nobody was in the middle, including in my own profession. He drove some of the owners crazy with his remarks about this team or that team.
Giff, I think when this one is over, we should go into the league offices on Wednesday, get the films of the game, and take them around to local high schools as a study in futility.
Wow, that's heavy, Howard. Howard said that, America. Howard said that.
In 1970, we were doing a game in Franklin Field, Philadelphia.
A bitter cold night. The Giants, with a victory against the Eagles tonight, could reduce the edge to a half a game. And
when we got on the air, it became apparent that Howard was having some problems. He started to slur some words. By the time we got to halftime, his slurring had become fairly severe.
I'm not on camera now. We're in Philadelphia at Franklin Field. The score, the New York Football Giants 13, the Philadelphia Eagles 9.
Howard's wife, Emmy, called me during the telecast, and she said, Jimmy, you listened to the game? I said, yeah. And she said, Howard doesn't sound right. So I called the truck, and I talked to our producer, and I said, Howard okay? And he said, Jim, Howard's had too much to drink.
Franklin Field, Philadelphia, 13-9 Giants, halftime score. Tough game. Don Meredith, key points.
Oh, I think a couple of fumbles, Howard.
He had the good sense to realize he better get off the air, and he left at halftime.
In case some of you fans are wondering what's happened to my friend and cohort, Howard Cosell, Howard has been sick this week.
Meredith had one of his great lines. He said, yeah, how about that? He got sick all over my boots.
Howard always said for years after that it was an ear infection, that he'd gone to the doctor, that he had ear problems. I can't doubt that. I can only go by what other people are saying.
We wanted people to be afraid to turn Monday Night Football off and go to bed because something so outrageous would happen that everybody at the office the next day would be talking about it.
Now I've got a most familiar figure and face for all of you across the country here with me now. Of the original Beatles, Mr. John Lennon.
Originally, Howard was going to interview Reagan, but when he found out John Lennon was coming on, he said, Gifford, you take the governor, I'll take the Beatle.
Will the Beatles ever reunite?
You never know. You never know. I mean, it's always in the wind. If it looked like this, it might be worth doing, right?
You did just spend the weekend with Ringo.
Yeah, and I promised him I'd mention his album out now, and I said I wouldn't mention my own, which is out now, too. Forget it.
Thank you very much,
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Right now, we've got to rejoin the Giffer. Frank
Okay, Giffer. Over to Giffer. Bye-bye.
That's Larry
Smith, once of Florida. And
Howard's talents at doing the halftime highlights were immeasurable. He would have no script with him whatsoever except for a shot sheet to say this person ran the ball or caught the ball for X number of yards and it made the score Y. Everything else that was said during the period of this piece was strictly off the top of Howard's head.
Led by that man, number 32, O.J. Simpson, throwing to Mel Gray, the youngster from Missouri University. Mean Joe Green comes in and hits. What a ball game this was. This is Mac Harris. Look at him sneak through. Touchdown. Namath whispering to the center, John Schmidt. Schmidt didn't hear him. Confusion, despair, defeat.
Halftime highlights took on a life of their own. Of course, everybody blamed Howard for what was on halftime highlights. It was never Howard's decision. It was the producer's decision at the time.
I mean, we actually had people threatening, our lives. And so Chet Forty and I always used to tell everybody in the press that it was Howard that picked the halftime highlights because we figured, if somebody was going to get popped, it might as well be Howard. And so Howard's way of getting back was on the air saying,
The NFL highlights of key games yesterday as selected by the show's producers.
There were, I think, people who tuned in Monday Night Football because they hated Howard. Because they wanted to hear what he said so that they could yell what the television said.
Those Monday Night Football crowds, some of them in some cities, they were animals. Sometimes he would have FBI protection. And I used to watch those games just to make sure some lunatic wasn't there with an Uzi or an AK-47 shooting up the booth. I wanted to make sure that my father got through those 4+ hours every Monday night.
Well, we look forward to having you aboard. I take it you view tonight.
As the years went by on the Monday Night package, there were a few times where Howard became saddened by the criticism that he was receiving.
If you are super critical and if you are abrasive, that this is the automatic way to success, and that this is a form of journalism, which I just happen to believe that it is not.
Howard did not take very well to criticism. The line I remember him saying most frequently was referring to newspaper reporters as those $10,000 a year hacks.
Yeah, he got at me today. Oh, Young.
What did he say?
Yeah, it's funny. Man's insane.
Howard basically despised the print press, and he despised them not because of what they wrote about him for the most part, but apart from a few sports writers, Howard thought they were ignorant.
There is no question that a certain coterie of sports writers in this country has tried to develop a hate syndrome in my direction.
He was unbelievably sensitive to the most ridiculous criticism imaginable. I've actually heard Howard say, I can't believe what they wrote about me in the Des Moines Register.
Gifford, look what they wrote in Des Moines, Iowa, day before yesterday. Howard Cosell, Des Moines, Iowa. And this one from Ames. Yes, look at this from Montana. They wrote that. That's Howard Cosell.
I think to some degree Howard maybe brought it on himself because he took on the press and had a war with them.
I do have better command of the language and nuances and inflections than you. Otherwise, you'd be in New York. But what's your next question?
Would you like to move to Miami, Howard?
No.
I don't think the town could stomach you. But to get back to Chet Forty...
To get back to you, that's a rude and insulting remark.
What was yours just prior to that, Howard?
So he was a target, and he was a bullseye, and it was, hit me here. And he'd go out of his way to some way fan that flame, but at the end of the day, I think he paid the price in the amount of criticism that he got.
You stir them up.
Stir them up to what? I said, don't get me on the phone, call or write ABC. Not you, by the way, Bunky, ABC.
That's the end of this interview.
You look at the world attacking Howard. He created very hermetic, insular places for himself, his family. He had an incredibly supportive, strong wife.
Emmy was closer than a wife, closer than anyone you could imagine to Howard. Ultimately, Emmy was the only one Howard ever trusted.
Emmy's my life. She has been for 28.5 years.
He wouldn't go anywhere without Emmy. Howard always wanted her at his side.
Emmy could control him. I mean, I've heard her turn around, Howard, you're acting like a jerk. Oh, sorry.
They were almost perfectly matched. He rocked and rolled with every breeze that came rolling by, and she did not. She remained calm, and that was great for him.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report from ABC News and ABC Sports.
The peace of what have been called the Serene Olympics was shattered just before dawn this morning when Arab terrorists went to the headquarters of the Israeli team and immediately killed one man. They've been holding 14 others hostage since then. Howard Cosell has been inside the village, has an interview with apparently the best friend of Moshe Weinberg, the man who was killed. So we're going to show you that interview right now. Howard Cosell inside the Olympic Village.
And now, by circumstance, I have run into the man who was the dead man's best friend.
I remember Cosell put aside whatever he thought personally about the fact that Jews were being held hostage, Israelis were being held hostage. Howard saw this as a great story.
You're heartbroken, of course. Of course. We feel terribly for you, the whole Israeli contingent.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
They've now said that there were 11 hostages. 2 were killed in their rooms yesterday morning. 9 were killed at the airport tonight. They're all gone.
What developed later had a profound effect on Cosell in 2 ways. One, he was terrifically frustrated by not being given the anchor role that Jim McKay got.
Howard came into the control room from a cocktail party that the head of entertainment had given. And he wanted to go on the air, and I looked at him, and he was emotional, and he had had several drinks. And I told him no. And I don't think he's ever forgiven me for that.
The second thing, though, and the more lasting and profound, was, I think in a way, Howard rediscovered his Jewishness.
I think he felt here was a microcosm of Jews once again being threatened in a setting which was, sadly, all too familiar. And he was passionate about that.
I lay on my belly on the slope of a tiny hill, maybe 30 yards from Building 31. I saw those Arab faces at the windows with the hoods. And finally, as Jim McKay so eloquently but simply put it, they're gone. They're all gone. And I'll tell you, by God, I'm Jewish. And I'm proud of it.
How do you describe Howard Cosell on the air to someone who had never heard him before? It's like, think of a very smart man scolding you with a bad sinus condition, who had a great vocabulary.
Because he doesn't really have confidence in his own stamina, despite his protestations to the contrary. Where Schuler's a genius is in his coordination of these people, the proper delegation of authority, and yet the close cohesion that he produces in and between the respective units.
Howard had that voice, had the broadcasting voice and the broadcasting presence all the time. I mean, it wasn't that he would sit quietly and be introspective and then suddenly turn it on for the cameras. If Howard said, you know, pass the salt or I'm going to get the newspaper, it sounded like an exciting event.
The 3 ball right in the center of the table. There's the arrow, but the arrow is on the 9 ball. Right next to it, Moscone will try a game-winning combination. And it works!
You know, I mean, one can only speculate on what it must have been like making love with him, because he, you know, everything he said had that sense of event and crisis to it and urgency.
And there's Joe Washington.
Look at this! Oh, this! How could it happen? What a football game this turned out to be! And the guy who's done it is Joe Washington.
Campbell to the outside.
He's gone!
He may take it all the way. Oh, is he putting on a show tonight?
Look out, America. Here comes Houston. America's fastest growing city. And right now, America's football team.
Hello again, everyone. This is Howard Cosell. We'll be bringing you the heavyweight championship bout between Joe Frazier and George Foreman at Kingston, Jamaica.
Howard in Jamaica is an opera. It's a phenomenal performance by an announcer in a fight.
And we'll find out tonight just how good George Foreman is in punching and in taking a punch.
It was extraordinary in its ferociousness. He brought you into the ring with him. He had picked Foreman to win.
I think he hurt Joe Frazier. I think Joe is hurt.
Down goes Frazier. It's pretty extraordinary.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Didn't I tell you that kind of an attitude?
3 words. 1, 2, 3. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Now, anybody can say that. But the way he said it was the story.
Angie Dundee, Ali's trainer, right next to me is saying it. You may hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. The heavyweight champion is taking the mandatory 8 count, and Foreman is as poised as can be in a neutral corner.
He is sucked up into that ring with his energy, and that performance for Howard Cosell to me is unbelievably powerful.
He is all over Frazier again. He has Frazier in the corner. Frazier's knees buckled. He is about. He is down. He is down for the 4th time in the fight. It's target practice for George Foreman. It is target practice. There he goes. 3 times. 3 times. The fight is stopped. No, it is not. It is not stopped. Angie Dundee is screaming, stop it. Ferdy Pacheco, Ali's doctor next to me. It is over. It is over. It is over in the 2nd round. George Foreman is the heavyweight champion of the world.
I can almost hear Howard patting himself on the back. I told you. Down goes Frazier. I told you it would happen.
Did I tell you?
We got fantastic material.
Did I tell you that Foreman would do it?
I am not guilty of overstatement here, but I think in the late 70s through early 80s, Howard Cosell would have been one of the 5 most famous people in the United States.
Hello, everybody. My name is Howard Cosell.
This is Howard Cosell bringing you tonight's football.
This is Howard Cosell talking to you about sports.
His voice was so easily, imitated.
Here you are at ABC working with James Alvin Palmer, with Keith Jackson, and yet you stand here. Diminutive in size in many ways. This is tremendous, Don, just tremendous.
I thought of him for my movie Bananas because I needed someone to broadcast, do as though it were a sporting event, the assassination of a South American president. And I thought Howard, just on the natch, would be great.
Would you people let me through? This is American television. American television.
I mean, he just took the microphone and went over there and did it, and was great immediately. I didn't have to give him any direction.
Sir, you've been shot. When did you know it was all over?
Fascist. Dictators.
Well, of course you're upset, and that's understandable under the circumstances.
By then, Howard Cosell was a major star, a major TV star.
Sportscasting
And the 2 times he was on our show, he boosted our ratings just like that.
Mr. Oscar Madison.
Thanks, Needle Nose.
He believed that he knew how to act. So that when Oscar said something to him, he went... He did things like that. And no one told him not to, because it was kind of funny.
Howard got so big about that time that it was common to say, the cliche was, he transcended sports. And he was even given his own primetime variety show.
Saturday Night Live with Howard Cosell.
You have to understand there was another show going on in town at that time. This was the first year of Saturday Night Live, the NBC late night show. So we had that show on one hand, and you had Saturday Night Live, the ABC Howard Cosell show on the other.
He came to see me in a nightclub in 1975. Thing ends, it goes well, and he walks into the dressing room. And he was tall. He was a big guy and imposing with that cigar coming at you. It's like curb feeling, you know. You're a funny young man. Let's do it. I want you on the show.
I'm proud to introduce him to you now as he makes his debut on national television, young Billy Crystal.
The show quickly turned, and by the second and third episode, the ratings were falling off. We ran for about 12 weeks into January before we were canceled.
We never saw a real Howard Cosell. I mean, these were friends of his, and he didn't want to offend them. He was just a different person.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's move back now to Johnny Cash in Dallas, Texas.
The record shows, I believe, that Howard, in fact, sadly became a caricature of himself.
I don't believe Howard could ever look in a mirror and tell himself that he had lost credibility. I think Howard saw himself as much of an entertainer, as much of a celebrity as the people he was covering. I think Howard enjoyed being around celebrities. I think Howard enjoyed being a celebrity.
CBS has won the obstacle course competition.
Woody Allen, I believe it was, who said, Howard isn't a person, he's a cartoon. And I think that was beginning to eat at him a bit. And until we got to the Olympic Games. And there he, again, very much established his credentials as a reporter.
When we got to Montreal in 1976, he was very aggressive with Roone Arledge about the quality of the American boxing team and how much coverage he thought it needed and demanded.
What about our Olympic team this year, Jimmy? Well, I think the United States can win as many as 6 medals in the forthcoming Olympic competition.
Sure enough, as it turns out, the Americans won 5 gold medals. But no figure represented Howard's passion for the young man emerging as a big star, as did Sugar Ray Leonard.
Ray Leonard, his dream is realized as he has won himself a gold medal.
He had had this same kind of experience with Cassius Clay / Muhammad Ali, and here was his opportunity to do it again with Sugar Ray.
Listen, what are you going to do with the right?
Well, I'm planning on moving on him, and I know I can catch him.
So you're going to people had a tough time grasping on who's who, what's what. Howard changed that all around. They knew who these fighters were. When they went into the professional ranks, they were stars already.
We started talking to ABC, I think, in 1975, seriously, about their coming in beginning in the 1976 season. And we didn't get very far before I was saying, now, of course, we don't want Howard on the baseball broadcast on ABC, because I'd heard too much, not indirect criticism, I mean flat-out criticism of baseball.
So baseball has the inherent problem of being a leisurely game. Dull now to many people, where it didn't used to be, and market research proves this out.
He threatened to take the rights to NBC, and that he was going to do everything legally possible to break our contract if we had Howard on there. But there were many people like that who just absolutely were not going to let us have the rights to events if Howard was on them.
Roone said, let's have you and Howard and I have lunch and see if we can't work something out on this, and maybe that'll help. He explained why he wanted Howard on the telecast.
I told Bowie that he was going to find Howard interesting.
After we'd both taken our shots, he said, well, Howard, what do you think? And Howard said, I agree completely with Bowie. And Roone said, it doesn't make any difference what you think, Howard. You're still going to do Monday Night Baseball. And he did.
High drive, it's to right center field. That's gone. Chris Chambliss has won the American League pennant for the New York Yankees. A thrilling, dramatic game.
Whenever we did an event and Howard was the announcer, the event went up a notch in everybody's mind. It just seemed more important because Howard was there.
When I first started working with Howard on a fairly regular basis, which was 1977, and we were doing a lot of Monday Night Baseball games, it was a lot of fun because it was always a treat to be around Howard. You never knew what was going to happen. There was a situation in Kansas City in 1981 where it was a combination of, I guess you could say, not only ego, but having a few drinks during and after dinner. And now we're going back to, at that point, the Alameda Plaza Hotel. And we're stopped at a light, and Howard looks over, and there are two kids having a very serious fight. Well, Cosell gets out of the car and says, "Now I want you to listen here. It's quite apparent to this observer that the young southpaw does not have a jab requisite for the continuation of this fray. This confrontation is halted post-haste." Cosell signs a few autographs and gets back into the car. We stop at a red light, and Peggy turns around and says to Howard, "Mr. Cosell, I have been driving for a long time, and I have seen a lot of things. I have never in my life seen anything like that." And Howard leans back in his chair, takes a long drag on the cigar, and says, "Peggaroo, just remember one thing. I know who I am." And it's as simple as that.
Mr. Howard Cosell.
Howard was very much like a lot of top performers, basically insecure.
He was a strange mix of monumental ego and tremendous insecurity. I mean, that's tough chemistry.
Shake your hand.
Sure thing.
Good to see you.
He couldn't expose that insecurity, so rather than expose that insecurity, he exposed that great confidence in himself.
Let's put it on the table, Dinah. I am great, and I'm not going to apologize.
I know, you don't have to.
Why write to Marina? Why not?
Sportscasting is a great business, and it's a business that I think gets a lot of respect generally. Howard never really felt that it got the respect that he should have gotten. That he was in a business that was kind of like here, and Howard was way up here.
He told me for years that he should have been the anchorman of the ABC Evening News. He told the boss that he should have been the anchorman of the ABC Evening News.
He is not a journalist in the normal sense of the word. He's a columnist, and he's a person who dispenses opinions. And there's a role for that, and the role we created for him on Sports Beat allowed him to do commentary. But on the evening news, you want straight, serious news. And I don't think he ever really understood the difference.
ABC News has confirmed that John Lennon, a member of the famed Beatles, maybe the best-known member, was shot twice in the back outside of his apartment building in the west side of New York tonight, rushed to the Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival. An unspeakable tragedy.
His beat was sports, but he thought of it as news.
ABC Sports presents from the Houston Astrodome in Houston, Texas. Hello again, everyone. Tonight, we hope it will be a worthy event. We frankly don't know. We hope.
The Holmes-Cobb fight in 1982 was Howard's final professional boxing telecast.
Corners of the United States. British boxing
He
announcer.
was insatiable in his commentary about how one-sided and how awful the match was.
It's a personal opinion, but I think the referee should think about stopping this fight. This is brutalization. I wonder if that referee understands that he is constructing an advertisement for the abolition of the very sport that he's a part of. And there'll be no post-fight interviews. Not for this fight.
When Howard left or retired from boxing, as he said, because he thought it was such a terrible fight, I never accepted that as the real reason. I've always felt that he was just tired of it and he was looking for an excuse so he wouldn't have to do boxing anymore.
I would like to have seen people who criticized him take that stand and give up the kind of money he gave up to stand up for something he believed in. And believe me, he loved boxing. Boxing is what gave him his start, not football.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the advent of our 14th year of ABC NFL Monday Night Football, the longest-running primetime show in American television. And
what was really sad about the turn that Monday Night Football took in regard to Howard was Howard felt a change toward the guys he was working with.
He always felt that Don and I were out to get him. I think he always felt everyone was out to get him.
He couldn't put away the idea that Gifford would never have gotten there if he hadn't been the golden boy of his time and a great jock.
The jockocracy, as he referred to it over and over.
Don't be discouraged by the open corruption, if you go into sports of television, that takes a guy who's an athlete with no training, such as you have had, no preparation, and immediately puts him on the air in the guise of a broadcast journalist.
There was always an underlying tension on Monday Night Football. And this wasn't the Swiss Family Robinson.
It's sort of like a marriage gone bad. I think that the longer they stayed together as a group, the less fun they had with each other.
He was 65 then. Howard was tired. He'd sort of done it all. He'd much rather talk to you about his grandchildren. And of course, the biggest controversy was just about to hit him.
You've heard it before, Don, but from the beginning, as we look at an end zone replay, Jake Gibbs wanted to get this kid, and that little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?
He certainly does, as a matter of fact.
I swear to God, when he said that, I almost died. Because the vultures who really did not like Howard Cosell, they were there, and they were out of their trees in an instant.
Now he's being labeled a racist for using a remark that he often used with his own grandkids. And he was totally innocent.
I still hear it. I still, people, when they find out, they're like, oh, your grandfather called Alvin Garrett a monkey. What? My grandfather called me a monkey. We were the little monkeys running around. Everyone was.
You know, for a guy who was so smart and original, Howard tended to say the same things over and over again. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he said little monkey lots of times.
Adamley going to the outside, breaking tackle, finally stopped by Richmond Flowers.
You know, that little monkey, again, the theorem was that he was too small for pro football.
Howard was totally colorblind when it came to race. He didn't care. And I thought it was terribly unfortunate. And by 1983, when Howard uttered those words, his relationship with people, both inside ABC and outside ABC, was becoming more and more strained.
And he really got to the point where he felt that it was beneath him to continue doing Monday Night Football. And so I said, well, you're crazy to do it, so stop.
We're joined again this morning by Howard Cosell, who has written a new book. It is entitled I Never Played the Game. It's causing quite a stir in the main because of some of the things that were said about some of the people, but the book...
I always looked at Howard's book as cruelty in the guise of candor. And in Howard's book, he chides me. I mean, Gifford really got it. Meredith really got it.
Gifford and Meredith were as thick as thieves. They would never take sides against each other, and somehow I always was cast as the bad guy.
I never read the book. Meredith never read the book. I had enough agitation with him, traveling with him for Monday Night Football. I didn't have to read it to get further agitated by it.
The people who he talked about, who did read it, were very unhappy with him. People were unhappy that he would, having enjoyed so much success and having had so many people contribute to his success, that he would turn around and be so negative about them all. But if they knew Howard, that's the way he was at the end.
Not once did I attack anybody in his personal life or about them as people. Frank Gifford can have the shirt off my back. I've known him more than 30 years. I made that absolutely clear. But it would be dishonest for me to say that I thought he was a great play-by-play announcer. In that vein, I haven't said anything that sports writers across this country have not been writing. The record speaks for itself.
I don't think he really understood fully that when you give opinions and you say some of the things that he said, that there would be such venom on the parts of individuals. I don't think he ever really fully understood that, and I also don't think he could control himself for saying what he thought to be the truth.
It provided the perfect opportunity for room to take Howard off the World Series of 1985, which of course led to the end of Howard's career at ABC.
After Howard decided to leave ABC Sports, this was in late 1985, I thought that we should honor him with a reception or a dinner. And I'll never forget his reaction. He said, "Jim, I don't want to be honored. If you want to talk about my departure, talk to my agent." And those were the last words I ever heard from Howard Cosell.
My father had a very, very severe heart condition, and he was much sicker than anyone knew, and this was during the 80s. I became aware of it in 1988, and I started to see behaviors in my father that were not the behaviors of a man I even knew.
I'll tell you what questions to ask. I'll answer them tersely, and you won't look like a blithering idiot. Forget.
That was also the year that my mother was operated on for cancer. My mother died 2 years later, in 1990, and for all intents and purposes, my father also died that day.
There's just one thing I'll never get over: my love, my lady. She was everything to me. This is the most difficult broadcast I have ever had to do. I have lost the treasure of my life. And so I say, in memory of my glorious wife, my heart aches, and I thank whatever gods may be, Emmy, for your unconquerable soul.
I think that Emmy was just critical to his whole being, and that he was devastated when she died.
He was angry that his wife had died. He was angry that he was not with her when she died. He was in Kansas City making a speech. I think he lived the last years of his life believing that had he been there in Manhattan, perhaps he could have saved her. And that's a terrible, terrible feeling to live with.
We tried to keep it a very personal matter how sick my father had become. We wanted him to have dignity.
They were agonizing years for him, agonizing years for my sister and I, for his grandchildren, and for anyone who cared about him.
So, Bob, we will go down in about 10 minutes.
Yeah. I remember right before Howard died, I walked in, and he looked up with no recognition whatsoever. And I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was the worst thing that could happen to Howard Cosell, whose weapon, his personality, his life had been predicated on his mind and his quickness and his brilliance. And he was all of that. And now he'd been robbed of that. We talked about how much he missed Emmy. And then he broke into a song which is so revealing to me. It was, "Where are you? Where have you gone without me? How can I live without you? Where are you?" And I thought, oh my God. And that's how Howard left us.
As we said, it's not been a great weekend. We learned today that an old friend and a colleague of many years, Howard Cosell, has died. He died of a heart embolism. Here in New York today, he was 77, and he taught us all a lot.
They came, some said, through the mists of another era. Others stepped off the pages of today. Giants in tribute to a titan, Howard Cosell.
I was sitting with Ali, and Ali taps me on the arm, and he says to me, he says, "Little brother, do you think Howard's wearing his hairpiece?" So I said, I don't think so. And he said, "Well, how will God recognize him?" So I said to him, "As soon as he opens his mouth to complain about something, they're going to know it's him." He goes, "Yeah, I think you're right." And he just gave me a little thing like that.
To say goodbye to Howard was to say goodbye to a giant.
Howard Cosell was driven and neurotic. He had a really fine sense of moral consciousness. There are no heirs to Howard Cosell.
He could be infinitely cruel, but did not consider himself cruel. He would consider his cruelties the tough love of telling it like it is.
He helped all of us
get to a point where we weren't afraid to speak out and say what we think.
He was the omniscient, all-knowing, all-seeing eye of the viewer. He really carved out a role that had not existed in this business, and I'm not sure even exists to this day.
He was larger than life. It's hard not to miss all that hysteria, all that excitement. The silence is deafening.
Mustard, no onions, just a little tiny bit of sauerkraut.
He's a legend in his own mind, which is a pretty good line. Channel 7 in Miami is not an ABC affiliate, so I don't care.
That very confidence is the characteristic of Dustin Hoffman's tennis play. Fair statement? Thank you very much. I don't mean to interrupt. We have to go to sprint skating at Lake Placid, and Cuba will become good at that, too.
Now we know why Mr. C. Emmy travels with the coach.
Let's turn the dime.
Why do you call it Terry?
What a nut.
Is the greatest scene we are about to capitulate.
Just a minute, Bill Cosby. This is the real Howard Cosell and Sanchez and Castillo, two of the popular but lower weight classification fighters.
Team, he created an offensive line. Handed the ball to number 32. Is this an evidence of dolphin proficiency?
The familiar wise guy grin, the sophisticated air, without any girls surrounding him, Joe Willie Namath.
Now, you sure you want Cosell here next time? We'll work on it.
Good night and good luck, Joe.